What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 4 of Sales Stories in Real Life 2.0. I'm your host, Alex Spruski. Today, I've got Salman Mohiuddin with me, the founder of Salman Sales Academy. He's been in the trenches for over 17 years as an SDR and AE at some of the biggest names. Salman, welcome to the show. Our first recording was one of our favorite. If you haven't listened to it, go check it out. As you know, we are starting every episode off with value right away. So, Salman, let's dive right into it. What's some immediately implementable advice that listeners can use in order to be more buyer centric in their selling approach?
I'll share 3 words with you. Problem before product. It's something that I've aligned to, especially in the second half of my career, because I'll tell you, when I started off, I led with the product. Why did I lead with the product? Because a lot of onboarding sales teams, a lot of the training was around, here's our product. This is what we do. These are the benefits. Here's the features. Here's the functionality. And that's every conversation I led with my customers, whether it was a cold call or discovery, whatever the case may be. But your customer sitting there saying, so what if you can do this? Do you even know my world? Do you know the day-to-day challenge and the fires that I'm putting out every day? If you don't align and understand their language, their world, and you're focusing on your buzzwords and language, your message will not resonate. So my number one piece of advice for every seller, whether you've been in the game 2 years or 20 years, is understand and articulate the problems that your customers face on a day-to-day basis. That is the key.
Mm. You preach this all the time, and this is one of my favorite topics. Let's say that folks are having trouble with this. They kind of take a look in the mirror and they're like, you know what? I am talking about myself too much. I am talking about my company too much. What would be some kind of first steps that you would recommend for folks to really start going down that path of being more problem centric versus your solution centric?
100%. Two things. Number one is take a step back, and I like to build out a chart, and I do this with every single AESDR that I work with. Take the product off the table and focus on 4 things. Number one, who is the persona that you're targeting? For example, if you're targeting IT directors or CIOs, understand a high level their roles and responsibilities. Number two, outline the problems that they actually face on a day-to-day basis. Where can you find this? 2 areas. G2.com is a great resource. Put in your company name or your competitor's company name if your company is too small and you don't have a G2 profile, and look at some of the reviews. And one of the questions that they ask in each review is, what are the problems this solution is actually solving for you? So you can outline some of those problems in the prospect's language. Second thing you can do is go to your case studies or your competitors' case studies, but don't look at the second half of the case study of what results and ROI that they saw from the solution. Look at what their world looked like before they implemented your solution in their language, in their words, and outline those as problems. Don't use buzzwords. Don't use features, functionality, capabilities. The third thing is have a column that says impact. What is the negative consequence if they go forward with this problem, if they continue with this problem? It could be a direct impact on the customer experience. It could lead to project delivery times. And the fourth one, which a lot of people miss, Alex, is outline the metrics or KPIs that these personas, IT directors, CIOs, care about the most. Maybe it's total cost of ownership. Maybe it's something else, and outline how those are impacted. If you can have a really good understanding of that, it will take every cold call, every cold email discovery to another level, because you're going to put your feet in the prospect shoes, not yours.
That's such a good exercise for everybody listening to go through to look at a third party unbiased right reviewer, go to seeing your customers words. That's probably one of my favorite things to do, and I can even attest when you start using the language and the words of your customers rather than your own, or dare I say marketing jargon, everything just changes so dramatically. And speaking of marketing jargon, I feel like buyer centric is kind of going down that path a little bit where it's becoming one of these kind of nebulous, overused terms. I remember our first recording so fondly when we talked about like the roofing that was done and they brought in the materials that you were able to feel. Folks should really go back and watch that episode. It's one of my favorite recordings. Let's really kind of dive into what buyer centric actually means before the term continues to kind of slide down this path of being one of these overused words that doesn't really have much meaning behind it. What would you say buyer centric actually means to you, Salman?
Buyer centric is the customer's world because you're in sales, I'm in sales, you're in the trenches, you know it. We like to follow our process. Sometimes we get enabled on that, sometimes we don't, but we have a process where we have to go through a discovery and we have to uncover if the customer has a need and a process and a budget and a time frame. We go through the demo. We go through all this because we're enabled on that. The customer doesn't really care about that. They could be at any point in their cycle, in their journey, whether it be the awareness stage, maybe they've used a platform like yours in the past, maybe they've done all the research online and they're ready to come to you. You got to meet them where they are, not where you are. And that's the key. And it comes down to providing that experience. It's coming down to asking the right questions to understand where they're at. It comes down to following their path. Because guess what? A lot of people say, hey, we should coach the prospect through our evaluation in terms of how we lead deal cycles. But wait a second. What if they've been through this process before? Whether if they're in the middle of it? What if they've been with a company for 10 years and know exactly the process they need to go through? You got to match up where they are versus where you are. So that's what I believe is, taking a buyer centric approach.
Such a great point there. And I think for folks that are maybe struggling with this, I could throw out some advice of my own is like, and this is something that you say all the time. So I'm quoting you here is like, before you pitch, like you need to know what you're pitching for, who you're pitching for, where they are in their process. So I think, especially with meeting a buyer where they're at, it's really easy to get into a call and kind of get lost in just kind of the emotion of all of it. Take a second and like analyze like where are they actually at in their process, right? Like are they in the evaluation stage? Are they in the totally unaware stage? To your point, do they know everything that they need and they've been doing this for 10 years and maybe just their previous vendor is sunsetting and they know exactly what they want and it's like, hey, let's come and let's have a quick evaluation here. So that's a great shout always. And one of the things that I know you always talk about as well is like your biggest differentiator as a seller is the buying experience that you provide their buyers. And that's one of my favorite quotes ever. What what would you say even makes a great buying experience?
Yeah. If I were to sum it up in one sentence, Alex, is putting the prospect's best interest before your own. And it's easier said than done because we're in sales. We got quotas hanging over us, whether it's a monthly, quarterly, annual quota. We're judged on our performance and our numbers. If we're not performing, there's going to be repercussions. So there's pressure on us, but don't let that get the best of you. Don't let that put the pressure on the customer to make it seem like, hey, they smell our commission breath and we're thinking of our best interest before their own. Now, how can you make that happen? How can you put their interest before your own, but without affecting that experience? Number one, I think it's making sure that you fully understand where they're at in the cycle. I'll give you an example. I worked with a bank recently, actually, when I was at Salesforce, and they had multiple options they could consider. Now, I took a step back to understand, hey, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, typically when I work with customers like you that are facing a big challenge like this, I usually find that there's more than one option that they can consider, whether it's a third-party solution, doing nothing, choosing our solution, looking at a competitor. What are you considering? What are alternatives? That's important to understand because guess what? Don't get your happy ears. Oh, they want to see a demo. They want to see our solution. It's
Right.
all fine and dandy. Pay attention. They have some other options on the table. Understand what those are, and take a more consultative approach. And they basically provided me with three, four options that they're considering. Now, I didn't say like, oh, they suck. You got to go with us. We're the best. I said that's totally fine. Um, for sure, I'll appreciate you doing your due diligence. I would do the same if you're in your shoes. Do you mind if I provide a recommendation? Yeah, sure, go ahead. Would it be helpful if I provided some consultative approaches where I can share some of the pros and cons that some of the other customers have gone through in terms of determining which option would be best? I'm happy to put together a couple of slides that outline each option that you're considering and some of the pros and cons of each option. Would that be helpful for you and your team? And they appreciated the fact that I was putting their best interest before my own. Obviously, my option, I would be a little bit more biased towards that. But you know what happened at the end? They said this person really cares about our evaluation, the approach we want to take, and really putting our best interest first. In the end, they decided to go with our solution, even though it's more expensive than the other ones, but it's because I came with a non-biased approach and really led with the experience. So that's number one, is just one example. Number two is there's other things you can do to drive that better customer experience. Because I've told you this before, the number one differentiator that you have as a salesperson is your customer's buying experience with you and your brand. Now, what are some actionable steps you can take? There's a few very quickly. Number one is making sure you're asking thought-provoking questions to the customer, making sure you're asking questions that you don't have to, like, if you can Google it and find it, don't ask that question.
Right.
Come in with a point of view, do some research, do some homework, ask questions that are compelling and thought provoking. Number two, if you're say you're going to do something, do it. So my rule of thumb is within 24 hours, you got to send out follow-up notes. I'll give you an example. Another example is small things. I had multiple on-sites when I was in the AE with a customer, lunch and learns, breakfast. You know what I did? I sent each of the folks a note saying that, hey, do you have any dietary restrictions that I should be aware of? And guess what? A couple of people were gluten free, and they appreciated the fact that I went out of the way to bring gluten free options for them, and they called it out. These little things make a difference, and these could make or break your deal versus the competition.
These little things make a huge difference. And I know that for that last dietary restriction experience, you've had personal experiences of that yourself. So you've kind of been on both sides of the coin there, and you know how much it shows that you care. I mean, like let's just call it what it is. Like it shows that you actually care about the other human being. There was one thing that you said with your first story when you were selling the bank that just like really stood out to me is like how head on you took the risk on the deal. Like calling out like I know you have other options. What I know too is that there is somebody, probably many people listening to this that are avoiding the risk in their deals. I know because I've been there. I'm pretty sure most of us have been there, right? You try and kind of skate by and you're like, oh, well, if I don't talk about it, it won't come up. For the folks that are kind of scared to take the risk of that deal, of their deals head on, maybe they're a little more junior in their career, maybe not. How would you recommend those folks, or rather, let me rephrase that. What advice would you give to those folks about handling risk in your deals straight on versus maybe just trying to sweep it under the rug and hope it doesn't come up?
Yeah, put yourself in the buyer's shoes. How would they react if the only thing you're talking about is how great your solution is, how great you can bring value to the table? It comes across a little evasive, a little, salesy. Instead, come with an approach that's consultative. Even challenge them. I would say ask a question like this. For example, if you uncover a problem and how they're getting the job done today, ask a question like this to maybe disqualify them. Hey, listen, Linda, it looks like you have a few resources and tools today that your team is leveraging for customer service, and your agents are using these tools to uncover that data to respond to customer inquiries on digital channels. So, what's stopping you from just continuing to use those tools versus looking at an alternative like us? You know why I like that question? Because a lot of times, as salespeople, we try to convince or persuade others to buy. But what if we got the customer to convince us why they need to consider an alternative? And one of two things are going to happen with that question. Either they're going to tell us, things are okay, maybe it's not the right fit, or you're right, we do need to make a change because it's not cutting it today. So go in with confidence, ask the right question, and I guarantee you your customer will appreciate it.
What I love most about that question is either you're getting a DQ or the customer is telling you why they need to consider your solution. It's such a huge win either way, but it does take a lot of confidence to go in with a question like that. And your tonality matters, right? Like ask it. Don't tiptoe around it. Like go in there, ask the question. And if you get the response, hey, we actually don't need to evaluate something, like then you need to respect the customer on that wish too. I think that's also important to call out here.
100%. I totally agree with you on that.
So let's kind of keep going down this track of obviously how the buying landscape has just changed, right? Information is totally democratized. As you mentioned, everyone has 10 competitors, right? Maybe it was two, three competitors years ago. What kind of other big seismic changes do you see coming to the B2B buying and selling landscape?
Yeah, it's really tough because there's so much information and insights available at their fingertips. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of leaders I talk to that are in multiple Slack groups. All they have to do is put one message out there saying, "Hey, we're thinking about so and so solution or so and so problem we need to solve for," and they get 10 recommendations. Guess what? You may or may not be on that list. They may be deep down in that cycle.
Right.
So what I think is really, really important, yes, number one is multi-channel, 100%. The changes that you're making, like I'll give you an example. I read a post today where they talked about, you should be doing multi-channel, not relying on one channel. And that's key, right? A lot of you could write the best cold email in the world. It could be, oh my God, nobody's written an email like this. They're getting 100 emails on their inbox. What's going to make them stick out to you? And you had to rely on cold calls, on messaging and videos and social selling, which is so important to get your message out. Number two, referrals and social selling is coming to the next level, right? You need to be able to build those connections. You can't just rely on cold calls. You need to establish relationships. You need to build that brand on LinkedIn. You need to use social to get your word out there because if not, you're going to fall behind. So I think those changes are coming. And if you fall behind, it's going to be difficult to catch up in a competitive market.
I think those two are huge, particularly the social selling and referrals. Like, obviously, referrals have always made the world go round, but with social selling, it just changes the referral game completely. And just from an awareness perspective, that's a side note there. We're kind of winding down here, but I just love your perspective on all of this stuff. I mean, you've been an individual contributor, like we said, for 17 years. You're now running your own thing for 15 months now. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I'm sure a lot of people would love to know what's been the biggest learning experience for you going from individual contributor, big brand to now running your own thing?
That's a good question. So obviously as a seller, and you're a seller, so you know this, Alex, and you've been a seller for a while, you have a quota. You have a monthly, quarterly, annual quota, whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of pressure, right? Like with any sales role, you're under pressure to perform. If you don't perform, you're going to be questioned for it. If you do perform, you're at the top of the world. Flip that script. And sales is full of ups and downs. And I realized when I made the transition 15 months ago to go full entrepreneur, I have a quota too. I got pressure. I'll give you an example. Like, perfect example like me is I'm married. I got three girls, 12 and under, single income. So there's pressure on me to perform, right? As a seller, you have pressure. As an entrepreneur, you have pressure. Like I don't have a base salary, right? I don't get that consistent paycheck every month.
Right.
Some weeks are good, some weeks aren't so good. And I need to live with that. And I have a lot of pressure to perform to support your family, whatever the case may be, whether you're single, married, have partner, whatever it is. So there's a lot of pressure. And I think but pressure is a privilege. Yes, it gives me the opportunity to be flexible. But at the same time, I need to make sure I'm putting in 100% effort. I got to make sure I'm not taking days off, and I got to make sure I have a plan in place, which is completely relatable to when I was in AE, and I'm sure you can attest to that as well.
Definitely. I think we're kind of in this day and age where like being an entrepreneur is so glorified, and I feel like a lot of people are wanting to make that jump. Last question I'll throw at you is what advice would you give for people that maybe have that entrepreneurial bug for, for the better and for the worse? Like what did you do to get prepared? What would you recommend for someone who's thinking they want to go down that path?
Yeah, and I might have a different opinion from others, obviously, but I would say make sure you're prepared. I see a lot of folks that, you know, think they've been in the trenches for maybe a year or two, and they feel they can make that jump, and then they realize, wait a second, I don't have enough reps under my belt to
Right.
make that move. I would say make sure you have that experience under your belt first, where you feel confident, because it's a competitive market. You're going to be, there's going to be a lot of challenges, and build on those fundamentals. For example, from a sales landscape, build those fundamentals in sales. And I'll tell you why specifically. We have so many, and this is specifically for sales founders, let's say, for example, that want to start their own company or salespeople that want to start their own company. We have so many tools at our fingertips. there's AI tools or sales productivity tools that makes our job easier. And sometimes we lose the fundamentals or focusing on the fundamentals. Sometimes we need to take a step back and saying, what is sales about? Sales is about focusing on the customer, understanding the problem that we solve for, coming with really engaging questions and putting the customer's best interest. Those tools that you have at your fingertips sometimes take away from those fundamentals. Build those fundamentals, get more reps under your belt, and then, consider looking at our entrepreneurial journey. But be prepared first. You don't want to make mistakes along the way that you might regret later on.
That's super, super, super sound advice. Like I said, I think it's a little bit, we're kind of over glorifying it right now. And I kind of tend to lean on the sort of same thought pattern as you. Like, let me really be under my belt. Salman, this has been absolutely fantastic. Before we jump, anything that you want to plug with the audience? Where can people find you? What can people expect if they want to work with you? Tell us.
Yeah, totally. So follow me on LinkedIn. Salman Sales Academy is the company. I do coaching for AEs, SDRs, and starting to do more with sales teams as well. So give me a shout and happy to help.
If you're a salesperson, sales leader, a company, and you're looking for training, Salman is your guy. Salman, thanks so much again for a fabulous recording. Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. We will see you next week. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.